I'm 27, a graphic designer from Seattle. A few months ago, I decided to give Tinder another try after being single for a while. That's how I met Daniel. He was 30, polite, and well-spoken. His profile wasn't flashy or cringy, and his messages were thoughtful. He asked about my favorite hobbies, my favorite coffee spots in the city, and even complimented my work as a designer after I mentioned it. He seemed genuine, a rare find on dating apps. After a week of chatting, Daniel asked me out for coffee. He suggested a cozy little cafe downtown. I was nervous but excited. When we met, he was exactly as he appeared in his pictures, clean-cut, dressed casually, with an easy smile. The conversation flowed well enough, but there wasn't much chemistry on my end. He was polite and attentive, but I didn't feel that spark. After an hour, I thanked him for the coffee and politely told him I didn't see us going anywhere romantic. He nodded, smiled, and said he understood. I thought that was the end of it. But 2 days later, Daniel messaged me on Tinder, asking if I'd reconsider. When I didn't reply, he sent a long, apologetic message, saying he really enjoyed our date and would love another chance. I blocked him, feeling a little uneasy but mostly annoyed. That's when the strange things started happening. The next morning, I woke up to a message request on Instagram. It was Daniel. He must have found me through mutual friends or something. He apologized again, saying he wasn't trying to be creepy, but couldn't stop thinking about me. I ignored it and blocked him there too. Then came Facebook, then LinkedIn. Every time, I blocked him, thinking he'd eventually give up. A week later, I started noticing a car parked on my street late at night. It was a black sedan, and it looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. One night, as I was locking up my apartment, I spotted it again, parked across the street. The headlights flicked off as I glanced at it. My heart raced, but I told myself it could be a neighbor's car or a coincidence. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. Then I saw him. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was grocery shopping. I turned into an aisle and saw Daniel standing there, holding a box of cereal. He looked up, saw me, and smiled like he'd just run into an old friend. "Hey," he said, waving. My stomach dropped. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, just grabbing a few things. Small world, huh?" His tone was casual, but his eyes lingered on me a little too long. I muttered something about being in a hurry and walked away. When I got to the checkout line, I looked back and saw him standing by the entrance, watching me. That night, I installed a security camera outside my apartment door. The gifts started showing up a few days later. The first was a cup of coffee from my favorite cafe, left on my doorstep with a sticky note that read, "Thought you could use this." No name, but I knew it was him. The next day, it was a book I'd mentioned liking on our date. Then, a necklace identical to one I'd lost years ago. Each time, I felt more violated. How did he know where I lived? How did he know about the necklace? I reported everything to the police, but without direct threats or proof he was the one leaving the items, they couldn't do much. One night, I was sitting on my couch, scrolling through my phone, when I heard footsteps outside my window. My apartment is on the first floor, and the blinds were slightly open. I froze, heart pounding, and peeked out. Daniel was standing on the sidewalk, staring directly at my window. When our eyes met, he smiled. I called the police immediately, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. I showed them the security footage of him standing there. But they said it wasn't enough to press charges. Frustrated and terrified, I changed my locks, installed more cameras, and started staying with friends whenever I could. For a while, things were quiet. No messages, no gifts, no sightings. I started to think maybe he'd finally moved on. Then, one evening, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. My stomach churned as I picked it up. Inside was a handwritten letter. It started with an apology, saying he didn't mean to scare me and just wanted to show me how much he cared. But the last line made my blood run cold. "I'll always be close by if you need me." I turned the envelope over and saw something that made me feel like the walls were closing in. It was a Polaroid of my bedroom, taken from inside my apartment. My favorite blanket was draped over the bed, and the book I'd been reading was on the nightstand. I checked the locks, the windows, everything. No sign of forced entry. That's when I realized he had been inside all along. I'm 30, a high school teacher from Chicago. A few months ago, I matched with someone named Laura on Tinder. Her profile was sophisticated, her photos were classy but not over the top, and her bio mentioned she loved books and indie films, just like me. When we started chatting, I was immediately drawn to her. She was funny, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. It felt refreshing, like I'd finally met someone who got me. After a few days of texting, Laura suggested we meet for dinner at a popular restaurant downtown. I was nervous but excited. When she walked in, she looked even better in person. She had this magnetic presence, like she could command the attention of a whole room without trying. The date started off great. She laughed at my jokes, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely engaged. But as the evening went on, I started noticing little things that felt off. Whenever I asked her about herself, she'd avoid the question. If I asked about her job, she'd steer the conversation back to mine. When I asked about her family, she'd make a vague comment and then change the subject. At first, I thought she was just private, but as the night went on, it felt deliberate. Still, I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just shy about opening up on a first date. The next day, I texted her to say I had a great time. She replied quickly, saying she felt the same and hoped we could meet again soon. I was thrilled. But then, things started getting strange. That night, I got an anonymous text. It quoted something I'd said during dinner, a stupid joke about grading papers. At first, I thought it was a prank. Maybe one of my friends had overheard me talking about the date and was messing with me. I ignored it. But then, the texts kept coming. Each one quoted something I'd said on the date, word for word. A few days later, I noticed a woman standing near the entrance to my school after hours. From a distance, she looked like Laura. Same dark hair, same build. When I tried to approach her, she turned and walked away quickly, disappearing around the corner before I could say anything. My stomach was in knots. Was it her? Or was I imagining things? I decided not to jump to conclusions and deleted Tinder, thinking maybe this whole online dating thing wasn't for me. But things only got worse. One morning, I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a simple drawing of the restaurant where Laura and I had our date. There was no signature, no message, just the drawing. I told myself it was just a coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The following day, I got a photo sent to my phone. It was me locking up the school after work. My hands shook as I stared at it. Someone had been watching me. I started double-checking the locks on my doors and windows every night. Finally, I went to the police. They took my statement and looked into Laura's profile, but it turned out the name she used was fake. Her phone number was a burner, making her nearly impossible to trace. They told me to stay alert and call them if anything else happened. I didn't feel reassured. Whoever this person was, they knew where I worked, where I parked, and what my routine was. They could be anywhere. For a while, things were quiet. No texts, no notes, no sightings. I started to let my guard down, thinking maybe they'd finally lost interest. But then, one evening, I came home to find my apartment window slightly open. I always made sure to lock it before leaving. so this immediately set off alarm bells. I stepped inside cautiously, my heart pounding. Everything looked normal at first, but when I walked into my bedroom, I froze. There was a single rose lying on my pillow. Next to it was a handwritten note. It said, "I'll see you soon." My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of anyone. No fingerprints, no footprints, nothing. It was like they'd vanished into thin air. Now, every creak in the floorboards, every shadow outside my window feels like a threat. I've installed cameras, changed my locks, and even started staying with a friend, but the fear doesn't go away. Whoever Laura really is, she's still out there, watching, waiting, and I have no idea when she'll strike again. I'm 24, a college student living in Austin, Texas. A few months ago, I matched with Ryan on Tinder. He was 28, a tech entrepreneur, and everything about him seemed perfect. He had this easy charm, cracking jokes and asking thoughtful questions that made me feel special. We started texting every day, and soon he asked me out. Our first date was casual but fun. We went bowling, grabbed burgers, and he made me laugh so much my stomach hurt. He shared funny stories about his work and seemed genuinely interested in my life. For the first time in a while, I felt like I could let my guard down. We went on a few more dates over the next couple of weeks. At first, everything felt normal, but then I started noticing little things that didn't sit right. Ryan would mention details about me that I'd never told him, like the high school I went to or the name of my childhood dog. When I asked how he knew, he'd just laugh and say he had a good memory, or it was a lucky guess. It was unsettling, but I didn't press him on it. Things got weirder. He started showing up uninvited, at my part-time job, at my favorite coffee shop, even at the library where I studied. He'd act like it was a coincidence, but it happened too often to feel random. I started to feel smothered, like he was always one step behind me. After he showed up at a friend's birthday party uninvited, I decided to end things. I told him I didn't think we were a good match. He didn't take it well. His face shifted from disbelief to anger, but he didn't say much. I blocked him on everything: Tinder, social media, even my phone. I thought that was the end of it. But then the messages started. They were anonymous, sent from different numbers. At first, they were harmless, like, "Hey, it's me. Let's talk." When I ignored them, they got more aggressive. "You can't just disappear. We belong together." One night, I came home after a late shift at work and immediately felt something was off. My apartment looked the same, but there was this eerie silence, like someone had been there. When I walked into my bedroom, my heart stopped. The furniture had been rearranged. My desk chair was moved, my books were stacked differently, and my laptop was open on my social media page. On the desk was a note. It said, "We're perfect for each other." My hands shook as I called the police. They came and checked the apartment, but found no signs of forced entry. They said it could have been someone I knew who had a key. I changed my locks the next day and started staying at a friend's place whenever I could. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I'd catch glimpses of someone in a crowd or a car that seemed to be following me. One night, I saw a shadowy figure outside my window, but by the time I looked again, they were gone. Desperate, I started digging into Ryan's life. I searched his name online, but nothing about a tech entrepreneur came up. Instead, I found a forum post warning about a man who used the same photos and a different name on dating apps. The post said he had a history of stalking women, showing up at their homes, and using fake identities to stay undetected. My stomach churned. I'd let this person into my life, and now I had no idea how to get him out. I decided to stay at my parents' house for a while. I didn't tell them everything, just that I'd had a bad experience and needed a break. For a few days, it felt like I could finally breathe again. Then, one morning, I opened the front door and saw a bouquet of roses on the porch. There was a note tucked inside. It said, "You can't hide forever." I froze, staring at the flowers as dread washed over me. Somehow, he'd found me again. Even now, I'm looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to appear. The scariest part is knowing he's still out there, watching, waiting, and I have no idea what he'll do next.